Hey guys, welcome to another video. I know it has been a minute, or should I say 2 months, since I have posted to YouTube or published a video. A lot has happened and a lot is still happening, but I'm finally back in a space where I can start back creating content. I'm just going to continue to move forward here in this video, and pretty much this is going to be another greenhouse update, the final move, I should say, for all of the plants. So every single one is being taken home today, and I think it could be probably around 400 plants of varying sizes. And in this video, I want to share pretty much exactly how I moved all of it, what are my recommendations, and what I wish I did instead. But first, let me take you guys down memory lane a bit. If you follow me on Instagram, you would know that these plants have been moved already. So, pretty much, they were all living at my old residence on the southern side, and I had to move all of them to the eastern side because we had to cut the canopy as it was starting to damage the roof as well as the infrastructure around the house. So, this is all of them after their first move, I would say, onto the eastern side of the property. And well, the point of showing you this is if you're hesitant about moving your plants around at your existing home or existing location, whether it's on the eastern side, western side, or whatever, once it's on the same property, it definitely can be done once you understand the requirements of your plants. I totally understand how stressful it can be to move plants around at your existing residence, but imagine what it's like to move it to a completely new location. I'm hoping that the takeaway from this video is that it can be done. As stressful as it is, you can do it if you're on the fence about moving your plants anywhere. It can be done successfully once you give it enough thought, you plan ahead, and you pretty much do all your preliminary preparations before you start to move anything. In the previous greenhouse update videos, you can see step by step what I was doing before this final move, which is the biggest move. And pretty much it was preparing a space to receive the plants first of all, but not just to do a general dump. I actually zoned the space and prepared it to receive plants based on their individual requirements. So, which ones needed more light, which ones needed low light, and those sort of things. So, once I knew I had a space prepared to receive the plants, which included me installing shelving, having an area to hang plants that needed hanging, making sure I had sufficient space and room for these plants, I started to think about exactly how I wanted the process to be pretty much when it comes to moving these plants. So, in the days before the actual move, I came up to the garden to sort of pre prep it before the movers came. During this time, I made sure to inspect all the plants to see if there were any sensitivities that I missed. For example, which ones had new leaves or which ones I had to take down personally. I also wanted to make sure that the movers had the least amount of handling to do. So anything that I could have done before, for example, all of these climbers, I'm going to take down and cut them, put them in a bucket of water, and sort of release any plants that have started growing onto the walls or into the soil below, remove any hanging plants. So just sort of prep the space to make the collection of these plants and depositing into the van as seamless and effortless as possible. I also had to consider if any injuries can be incurred. I didn't want any of the personnel to get hurt, whether it's from pests, because you all know I have snakes in here, iguanas are in here, a bunch of ants that could, possibly sting someone. So I kind of want to clean up the space as well, move around the pots a bit, and sort of disturb the area enough to not have any, issues that would prohibit the move. And you'd see exactly what I mean coming up in the video. I just wanted to make sure you guys had a clear visual of the plants that have to be moved, the quantity, the condition that they're in before we actually start to work. And just to reiterate, I personally took down my most critical plants way before this time had come, so months before I was moving plants on my own. Critical plants meaning plants that needed frequent watering, like my alocasias, those that are pest prone, like my alocasias as well, seedlings, propagations, any plants pretty much that needed constant monitoring. My most delicate plants, the most fickle ones, plants that I didn't want strangers handling as well. I preferred to take them out of the general transportation and handling. So now you're seeing me actually taking off my pollinated Anthurium inflorescences as part of the preliminary preparations. As mentioned before, here I am unhanging plants that were in hanging baskets or attached to structures that I used to support them in, and sort of trying to create a grab and go system when moving day comes. Taking the time to do this ahead of the move was definitely worth it, and I definitely recommend it because I was able to secure plants not only from just making the trip back up, but I found plants that I would rather move myself than have a stranger move it, and I also got to clean up. Anything that was messy at the old residence, and just to make the cleanup process a lot faster and easier, just going ahead of time to take all of these things down and arrange the space and neaten back up the space, just so that I'm still in keeping with all the rules of operating on this property. Here's an example of some pests that were overturned. It's an entire nest that was living in that pot. I'm so happy I found it and not the movers, because, like I said, I would really not want anyone to get hurt. And this bucket that you saw me previously filling was for cuttings of my large aroids that had attached to the walls and the trees. So instead of dumping them, I decided I would just give them away. You would have seen this post on my Instagram, and I just gave them all away free there. And just like that, moving day was here. We decided that we would try to start the move at 7 a.m. So I left home at around 5:15 to give myself enough time again to pre-plan and prep if it was necessary before the movers came. From talks with people who have done this before on a small scale and super large scale, that's like sellers who actually were moving their plants to new greenhouses and stuff, they all recommended, because my collection is primarily aroids, that I try to do this move as early as possible. And considering operational timing for the movers that I chose, now I chose these people because I 100% trust them. They are good friends of mine also. And, I didn't want to like push it. So we agreed at the time of 7 a.m. The benefits of attempting to do this in the early morning, well, relatively early morning, is not only to avoid getting stuck in the work traffic, but more importantly to me, to prevent the plants from getting burnt or severely dehydrated. Luckily for me, on this day, as I arrived, the movers pulled up right behind me. They were actually half an hour early. So they actually just jumped right into action. And because I had already prepped things from the day before, they were literally able to grab and go. We started moving the largest and the tallest plants first, because the plan is to wrap everything in a tarpaulin, and this would give us sufficient height to secure it properly. Here's a nerve-wracking moment. My Anthurium Brielle by Michelle, the new leaf getting a bit squashed, and here is the broken top of my Philodendron Florida Green. And in no time, the space was cleared. I was really taken aback to see everything just pretty much bare. And I couldn't believe I was at that point. And just as a side note, all of this also has to come down. So it's two trips they're doing today. So the first trip will be the plants, just as it'll be cooler, and I already had the place set up to receive the plants, and I just kind of wanted to get that out of the way first, and then they'll come back for all my tools, etc. So after I did my final checks, the van was pretty much packed to capacity at this point, and we were ready to hit the road. I also ended up taking some down in the van, as well as some of my tools that I needed immediately. And well, we hit the highway. And there goes the van ahead of me. They took a different route initially just to avoid some humps in the area and just some bad patches on the street. And we were on the highway. Believe it or not, this was nerve wracking. Again, you would have seen a reel on Instagram with me pretty much biting my nails for the entire time. I stuck behind them for as long as I could have just to, ensure that everything was running smoothly. But eventually, I took them over to just get a head start home and to be able to receive them seamlessly. I went ahead, make sure the gates were open, and we made it home all in one piece. Everyone intact. I have to go through everything. I'm sure there are broken leaves in there somewhere, but they all made it home in about half an hour. I decided to fast track you guys to the final unpacking. So, what I did was I just didn't unpack everything and dumped everything into the garage. The space here is the garage. I actually unpacked and sorted at the same time so that the plants that needed the same requirements were all grouped together so that when it was time to place them into their, well, temporary storage again, but you know, home for probably the next few months. I had everything organized. And on Instagram, again, you would have seen the final layout where I kind of just created two levels in the garage against our eastern wall and piled all of them in there from the most sun loving to the front, which would be all my variegates, to the plants that require the least amount of light or that were tall enough to still obtain light from the back. In keeping with the point of kind of zoning the new space before you start to bring your plants home, I just wanted to remind you all that I did have plants in my master bedroom as well as the plant room that I'll show you guys in the next clip. But because I have been studying the new home or the new space that these plants are going to live in, I was able to understand light requirements and how plants were performing before actually bringing the bulk of my collection down. So some plants came up here as well. It really is a lot to try and capture in one video, that's not too long or, not too boring because the basic point is just to understand your space before you even attempt to move your plants so that when the bulk of your plants arrive, it's really just to sort and place in the space that you've already studied and understood to avoid trauma to your plants and to just make the transition into this new space easier. This is the plant room that I mentioned before that is also stuffed with plants. I would have done a full tour of this space that you could check out. I'll probably just link it in the description for you all. But it houses most of my Anthurium collection. I had tested this space before to make sure the area would be conducive to that genus, and it worked out pretty well. I also had some extra space, so I piled in as much as I could as well. The final space that I used for plants was this area that homes my plants that need a bit of direct light. They receive light, direct light from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. And that's it for the zoning. I hope the insight into how this process was for me is useful to you and helpful in some way. I would love to answer any questions you have down in the comments or on Instagram. And finally, what I wish I had done was build my greenhouse before so that it can receive the plants in the state that you're currently seeing it in. And the trauma to the plants could have been minimized even more. And, just the experience for me could have been a little, less nerve wracking because I knew they would have been going into a home that is 100%, in tune with their requirements. Realistically, though, we have a lot of external work still happening at the new residence and it could not be done. But with that said, I guarantee you that my next greenhouse video will include the newly built from scratch greenhouse, and I can't wait to give you all a tour of that and take you all along with the building process for that. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this one. You can look forward to more frequent uploads as well as posts on Instagram. Thank you for your patience and for sticking around. If you have any video suggestions for me, feel free to just message me anywhere you feel comfortable. Oh, and I almost forgot, I have a new profile picture, which is really my new logo that I replaced both here and on Instagram. I would love to hear your feedback. In general, I have made some changes to make the viewing quality of my videos better. I look forward to presenting that to you guys in the future. So until then, thank you so much again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.